Angel here. Thanks for stopping by and welcome to My Favorite Things. Today I want to talk about Trevor Noah's book, Born a Crime. It's a really good book. I give it a 5 out of 5 stars. I was going to give it a 4, but it impressed me and blew me away a little bit more by the end of the book. So it was an excellent book. I listened to it on an audiobook and Trevor reads it himself. He's got a great voice for reading his own stuff. And let me just jump into, I have some notes here. So the very first thing that struck me that I really enjoyed about the book was his talking about hustling. I kind of hadn't I've listened to a lot of interviews with him and kind of put that together, but he really goes into more detail about his growing up, really hustling it. And I could really relate because I've grown up in a lot on the streets with a lot of hustle. And he had a quote that stuck with me that I really love, which was, hustling for money is like surfing the internet for reading. It's, the analogy being like, you're going to get a lot of it done, but you're never going to really get to the deep content. And I think that's so true. I've done a lot of hustling for money, and I'm still right now kind of hustling for money, which, by the way, you could support me by shopping in my eBay store. There's a link in the comment section. In any case, hustling for money and eking it out is different from really getting to that place that so many of us are striving to get, where we're really providing value to humanity, and so we don't have to hustle for money anymore. It's just flowing in support of the work that we're doing. That's what I'm trying to do, and I hope you're trying to do also. And anyway, I really liked all his stories about hustling, and then the way that he kind of puts that in perspective of overcoming that, or he's not disrespecting it even, and he's paying homage to it in a way, but he's also telling the story of how he kind of developed the mindset to overcome that by participating in it. And another thing that I really, really appreciate about Trevor Noah in general, every time I've heard him talk, but in this book in particular, he really goes quite a bit into how racism is not about skin color, and it's just a social construct that is based mostly on language and perceived income level in a lot of cases. So, and just that us versus them mentality, which I have been trying to speak to a lot lately. One of my main missions is to promote unification, breaking down borders, and really trying to find common ground with those of us who think we have a lot more differences than we have in common, because that's usually not the case. We usually have more in common than we have differences. And anyway, I really like that Trevor Noah uses his platform and this book to really dive into examples and questions about racism and how it's so. I think his experience has been fairly unique. Well, not like unique that nobody else has had any of it, but he's got a neat platform to present, and he's had a unique set of experiences that have really allowed him to see firsthand how much racism is a social construct, often promoted by governments, and has nothing to do with the color of your skin or even the language you speak, other than you often get perceived as a certain race based on the language you speak, or how you speak your language, or what kind of dialect you use. So I really like that he continues to bring that up, and indeed brings that up in this book. And back to a little bit of that hood mention, I really like that he does pay respect to, or not, he's not trying to tear down or discredit or disrespect those people who are hustling in the hood. And he, in fact, goes into a lot of detail about how much more trustworthy people are in the hood, and I'm going to put air quotes there, versus institutions. And I grew up on the street, raised by outlaws, again air quotes, and so I remember learning that early on too, that you can trust a thief more than you can trust an honest person in a lot of ways, because a thief will be up front. And that's an exaggeration, overgeneralization, but there is something to people who live, let's call it in the underground or the hood or the street or in the outlaw side of life, in the black market, who you have to have some higher degree of trust because there isn't that infrastructure of institution. And so people have each other's back. And that's part of what he talks about in the hood, is like, if any mom asked you to go get her some milk, if you weren't busy at the time and you could, then you would do that, because that's how people have each other's back in the hood. And I like the way he talked about that. So another thing that I really like that he brought up quite a bit and touched on in the book is the prison system, the injustice system, let's call it, kind of still very much attached to the racism issue and folded into the domestic violence issue, which is really the kind of linchpin, the crux of the whole book to me is well, it's about racism and domestic violence and his life, and that sounds like, gosh, what a terrible read, right? But no, I think he has a really healthy, really delightful perspective on those topics, and has really experienced them firsthand and from a lot of different angles. And his mother was I want to say victim, but was beaten profoundly a lot, shot in the face, like had some profoundly severe domestic violence perpetrated against her, and yet stayed in the relationship for longer than he would have liked, and as do many people involved, especially women, but people, men and women involved in domestic violence. So I just really appreciated that he told his story so frankly, and that he shed really well-spoken, well-educated, both from a learned perspective, historical perspective, and personal perspective of domestic violence. So those were my favorite things, and that he really highlights that we need to support people, especially women, who are in domestic violence and not blame them. And I personally have been beaten and raped and went to cops and asked for help and had them treat me like, made me feel more disempowered than the person who was beating me and raping me. Sort of similarly to what I was talking about with the hood. It's because at least that person, was trying to do you harm and wasn't hiding that. Whereas when you go to a first responder, a police officer, for help, and they victimize you further by not believing you, or by telling you it's your fault, or by downplaying what happened to you, or by taking the man's side and acting like it's fine to rape and beat women, it feels even more of a violation. It's even more disheartening somehow, in my experience, and I think in many women's experience. So I'm really grateful that Trevor Noah really shed some light on that topic in his book in a way that is digestible, palatable, I felt like. And that's probably one of my very favorite things about the book. I also like that he talks about sleeping in cars during some of the more impoverished time of his upbringing, where they were basically homeless and sleeping in a car repair shop. So they were sleeping in different cars. And I love that he talks about the difference between sleeping like in a American car or a Mercedes, or just the difference in comfort level and in insulation. I just found as a extra little favorite tidbit thing. So anyway, that is like, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 favorite things about Trevor Noah's book, Born a Crime. I really appreciated so many things about his story. I resonated with a lot of his story. I give it a 5 out of 5 stars. I highly recommend it. And I recommend it on audiobook if you're into that sort of thing. It's a good listen. I listened to it in one day, just let it play. It was captivating, and I might listen to it again. That's what I got to say about my favorite things about Trevor Noah's book. I hope you will support me in my eBay store. You can find the link down there. And let me know in the comments if you've read the book, if you have any favorite things about it. And until next time, peace, prosperity, and positivity.